Welcome to the Business Spotlight, where today the spotlight is shining on Matthew Quade from TSL. Welcome, Matthew.
Hello, thanks for having me, Nell.
Looking forward to this conversation, as always. To start us off with, tell our viewers a little bit more about you and the business, please.
Okay, so I'm the CEO of TSL. I only recently took over in September of last year, having had quite a varied career prior to that in a number of different industries, but gradually working my way up to a variety of interim and permanent leadership roles. Okay. So I won't go too much into that background for now, but and TSL is a provider of a variety of hardware and software solutions, primarily to the broadcast and media industry. So fundamentally a technology company with a broadcast and media focus.
Okay. How long has TSL been running for?
So the company as a whole has been around for closing on 40 years now.
Wow.
I think 1986.
Wow.
So
I can imagine they've seen some changes throughout that industry.
Just a little bit, yes.
I can imagine. Well, what made you decide to start working, to take this position for TSL? What was it about them that made you go, yes, this is the place for me to be?
So I have a relationship with the company that dates back about 7 years, actually. So I'd done a variety of sort of consultancy or interim projects with the company previously and had held interim positions with them before, helping them with M&A transactions, both buy and sell side, and various group restructuring projects, etc. in the past. So I knew the company well, had got to know the broadcast industry through TSL, which is, you know, a fascinating and fast-moving technology-driven industry. So so that was exciting. I'd got to know most of the company in terms of the senior board and most of the employees, felt it had a really good, strong team. And actually I was approached by the departing CEO to help him find a successor.
Okay.
But the more really that we got talking about what we were looking for and where the company was and the opportunities for growth, etc. that were there going forward, the more I thought that I was ready to come in from what was running my own business and sort of self-employment primarily for the last 8 years prior to that, to take a permanent leadership position with a company just full of great opportunities, really. So
nice, love that. Interesting, brought in to find a new one and then kind of put yourself there. Love that. Yep. I'm the best person for the job. So talk us through.
Well, I had to convince them.
I'm sure that you did, but
it wasn't self-selection. But yeah.
That you'd kind of been involved for the last 7 years meant at least that they knew what you were about, and both of you were aware of values aligning, as they say.
Yeah, I think certainly, obviously, Chris, who was the departing CEO and is one of the shareholders, you know, he and I obviously had developed a relationship through working on those projects on and off over the years, and also the founder of the business, who was still with us at the time. Again, I'd developed a relationship with him again over the years. So I think, you know, being a known quantity and knowing the business, it's quite a niche industry as well. So it can be quite difficult to marry up broader world expertise with broadcast expertise to find the right solution as well. So.
And actually, I was kind of going to go into more about the business and where the business has come from, but just something you said is tweaked a thought, because it's such a niche industry. Have you got loads of competitors? And it's an interesting industry, I can imagine, as well. Is it growing? Is it where is it sitting?
Yeah, so I think so if I try and break that down a little bit, I think so. In terms of competitors, then, you know, it really depends where you look across our product offering. But we have one quite niche area, which is called audio monitoring, which is very much a sort of specific broadcast requirement, where there are competitors for sure, but, you know, relatively limited number. You then have a much broader area of broadcast control, where again the competition would be broader, and that can mean very different things to different people. So and we then have an area of power management, which actually is not a broadcast specific thing at all, and we do in fact sell we sell those power management solutions into other industries like defense and aerospace and data centers. So that has a lot of competition, but equally is a massive market because it's not just about broadcast.
Yeah.
The broadcast industry, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, being able to see how what we all digest as content through what's obviously an increasing variety of screens these days, and not just TVs. And obviously we shouldn't forget radio as well, which is still huge. Being able to see how content, gets made and then ultimately distributed to those screens, and understanding those workflows and how it works is fascinating. And I think through my career, I've always loved the jobs most, or the companies I've worked with most, where something that you take for granted in your everyday life, and understanding what goes into actually putting that in front of you. So I can remember, for example, one of my earliest jobs being with a packaging machinery company that made all the machinery that ultimately packaged things like Ginster's pasties and things like that, right? But the machinery is amazing pieces of kit, and working for an engineering company that designs and manufactures those machines, and then seeing those production lines in operation is fascinating. So yeah, broadcast is a great industry from that point of view. And I think while people would probably think that what you might traditionally call broadcast is not a growth industry, the reality is that what broadcast media means now is ever expanding. So there's so many, the hunger for content and of different ways of delivering and distributing that content is such an ever expanding field that there is a lot of different opportunities, but you've got to be quick on your feet to move with it.
Yes, and I guess that creates lots of opportunities for your business, but equally some challenges because it is so ever changing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, being clear on what technology you're going to look to adopt, or what solutions you're going to pursue, and how you can deliver them, and the speed to market for those solutions is critical now. Whereas I think traditionally, actually, broadcast moved relatively slowly in terms of technology transition. So I mean, it's a lot of very big technological developments happened within the broadcast industry that then have played out into other areas in history. But I think broadcast traditionally was quite conservative with the way it moved forward. But now with the development of the whole streaming industry and everything else, it's really changing, and there's a lot more money floating around as a result as well.
So how do you do that as a company? How do you do you actually sit down as a board, as a leadership team, to kind of go, right, what's the new stuff coming up? What do we think is new? How do you manage that?
So I think the most important thing is obviously being close to your customers and your end user base, and getting constant input and feedback into what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, and what they're looking at trying to achieve in the next 6, 12, or even 36 months. And then looking at how we can adapt our offering to be able to move with that, and being focused on the fact that we operate in those 3 areas that I mentioned earlier of audio, control, and power is, I think, core to that, because you could very easily deploy our resources to think, oh yeah, but we could help you with this and that, and and suddenly you're that sort of magpie effect of trying to grab everything that's silver, and you're too your resources are too stretched. And so you've got to be retaining that focus on what we offer, but then adapting that offering to what we're hearing from customers about how the way that they're capturing and delivering content is changing, or they're expecting it to change, and also be accepting that you can't do it all. So there are certain technology decisions you're going to have to choose one path, and a competitor may well choose the other path, and therefore have a lead for any end customers who decide to go down that route. But if you try and do both at the same time, you probably won't do them well. And yeah, we do that through a range of processes internally. We have a very clear NPI, new product introduction process, that enables the product management teams to really scope and pitch what they want to do next. And that ultimately does get to the senior leadership team for ultimate sign off as well. Yeah.
Okay. So talk me through some of the things that you do well as a business.
I think that being close to our customers is definitely something that we do well, and building those trusted relationships, not just as a vendor of product and solutions, but as a sort of trusted partner or advisor to those end customers is key. And I think we've definitely built a good reputation for doing that, that I'm keen to maintain and build on. We've always had a real focus on the reliability and durability of our products. So I think, broadcast obviously is an industry, particularly in any sort of live environment, but even if it's a play out environment, you can't afford to have downtime and be off air for any period. And our products do sit in critical parts of the broadcast chain, where if something fails, the whole broadcast could go off air for a period of time. So I think that durability is absolutely essential, and again is something against competitors that we're particularly well regarded for. Interestingly, we had a visit recently to the Mumbai Indians cricket stadium in the IPL and the broadcast center that's underneath there. And we have a particular product in our control range called Tallyman, and in that control center, they had every generation of Tallyman from the original product that was first developed something like 16 years ago, and it's still there, and it's still providing
Nice.
a good function for that client in a live broadcast of a live sports that's going out all around the world. So that's brilliant to see that. And obviously they keep coming back if they know that they're getting that reliability.
Exactly. And that's a great return on investment for them.
Yeah. There is an argument that perhaps we should have an automatic fail switch after about 8 years or something. And
it's a little bit like the fridge freezer, as soon as it goes out of warranty, it breaks. Is that the one you mean?
Exactly. But no, it's great to be known for that. So I think, and we do that, a lot of that relationships is where, for our size, we have a widespread global direct sales force. So yes, we sell through channel partners and resellers and things as well. But I think having that direct sales force in all parts of the world, keeping that real direct personal touch with the end customers is key to that success.
Nice.
And I would say the other main thing is we're very independent in the way we provide our solutions. So across our product range, our solutions can integrate and talk to and work with any other vendor's equipment in
Nice.
any field. So the fact that we sell audio monitors doesn't mean that we tell people who are buying our control that you can only control our audio monitors. There are a lot of other providers, both in the power management and control side, who are very much focused on selling, if they're a control provider, their routers, their cameras, right? Whereas we've deliberately maintained that independence so that we give the end customer the choice in what other equipment they buy, even if it is competitive equipment to ours in another field. But
Nice.
we're still getting that sale by being that flexible and independent. So
like that. That's a nice one. So equally, I guess on the flip side of this, what have been some of the key challenges that you've experienced as a business?
I think recently there's no doubt that there's still a supply chain hangover from the pandemic, and we're pretty much constantly managing that in the amount of time and money that goes into managing that supply chain compared to what was the case 4 years ago is still very significant. So although it has eased, not enough yet. And obviously the inflation that comes with that, and trying to manage our margins and still hit a price point where people are going to buy the solutions. And so I think those are two of the biggest challenges, along with resources, which, finding the right skills at the right cost benefit in the right markets is definitely a challenge. And to be honest, being UK based, yes, we have a physical operation, another physical location in California as well, but actually, California is also an expensive place to be an employer.
Yeah.
So although we do have individual employees then in other locations around the world, but it's the current decisions that are being made politically in both California and the UK, and the impact that's having on us as an employer and as an exporter, are making both jurisdictions very challenging to recruit the right resources in. And I suspect that we'll see a fundamental change to the structure and balance of our business over the coming years.
Oh, interesting. See, the inquisitive side of me now goes, tell me more, but that might be something you're not keen to reveal just yet.
No, I mean, at a high level, the brutal reality is that if for example, you look at software engineers, ideally we'd have them as part of our core R&D team in the UK. We've kept flexible working practices post-pandemic. It's not about people being physically in the office all the time, but it's still, if you're not going to have that, still having people on the same time zones and things like that is valuable. And also because broadcast is quite niche, that the broadcast experience of people with the right software engineering skills does tend to be quite focused on Europe and North America anyway, to be honest. And that's changing, but it's that's traditionally been the case. But I think we are going to have to look at outsourcing to places like Eastern Europe in order to find the right skills, even if you ignore the cost. But the cost now of employment in both the UK and California is just escalating all the time. And the cost for those employees, ultimately, you're also finding that employees are not as keen to work in either of those two places as they once were, and they'd much rather be based somewhere else as well. So I should think we're likely to, if we grow the way we want to, we're going to need a physical operation somewhere else where we can attract the right talent.
So you're not necessarily saying, it's just something you said that again piqued my interest. You're not saying that there's a skills shortage in these places, but actually it's more around cost than anything else? Or are you also saying that UK side, especially, that there is a skills shortage?
Oh, no, I mean, there is a skills shortage. The other challenge, it's not all about, taxation, economic policy, and etc. The other challenge is that if you're, an SME like we are, we're never going to be able to compete with someone like Apple for the wages that they'll be able to pay and the package that they can offer. And obviously, in an inflationary environment, people with certain skills are going to look to find the best rewarding package that they can. There aren't enough people with the right skills to fulfill both the demands of a small technology company like us and the behemoths that do have big UK and Californian operations, for sure. But that just heightens that cost benefit argument again as well.
It's an interesting one. A conversation I've had with quite a few of my clients is around, you almost have to do marketing as a company in the same way to recruit new staff than you do marketing to recruit new customers, and it's all about
absolutely
what's exciting to work for you. And it's not necessarily about money for the sort of next generations that are coming, but more around what you stand for and the purpose and the values.
And I think on the I'll be careful how I word this. I think on different areas of the business, I think that's absolutely true. So I think if you are, if you're looking for marketing and sales resources and HR resources, I would agree with the statement you just made. I think there's definitely, it's about pitching the culture of the company and the opportunities for development and the, how exciting the industry and the customers are, etc., to work with, and the technology. But when it comes to something as linear as particular software engineering skills, then I don't think that you just can't narrow the gap enough, because you're talking about, we lost someone, for example, last year where Apple were paying them nearly 3 times what we were paying them. Now, I could have offered to pay a fair degree more than we were paying, but I could never get close to that. So it depends on the role and the skill set that you're looking for. But I agree that is a much more critical part of making yourself attractive to employees now than just the financial package.
No, I agree. So talk me through some of the learnings that you've had as a business over the last couple of years.
I think so. For me, although I'd worked with TSL on projects previously, my actual interaction with the customer base in the industry was was relatively limited prior to that. So the interesting thing for me is, having come from a background of lots of different, having worked in a wide variety of different industries before, broadcast being quite a niche area is also, or can be, quite blinkered in the way it looks and approaches problems as well. So for me, one of the key learnings I've been working on with the team is trying to broaden their horizons to learn from other industries and look at best practice in other industries and look to bring that in, and not assume. I think there's always been an assumption that broadcast is too individual, and therefore the way that aerospace does something or automotive does something, whatever, might not be that relevant. So we've actually deliberately targeted developing the team in a way that brings in more wider industry experience as well. So everything from our R&D team to the senior leadership team, we've brought in more non-broadcast backgrounds into that team, which I think has been really important. I think I wouldn't say they're necessarily learnings in the sense that they've always been kind of core tenets for me, but obviously with the disruption and uncertainty caused by the pandemic and its aftermath, I think being really focused on the way we've actually managed to keep producing all of our products throughout the last few years. We've never had to take anything out of production because we couldn't procure the parts. But the key thing about that was that we had good people in the right positions who were able to spot the warning signs early and take action to ensure we had a good supply of the necessary components to be able to continue doing that. So I think, again, always being, I guess to some extent it's a similar idea, but it's always being aware of the wider environment around you, and not just your business, your customers, but being really focused on what's going on. Because the reason there weren't yet problems in our supply chain directly, but because we could see what we were seeing in, say, automotive and the problems they were beginning to have, you could see how that would ultimately filter down. And so we went out and bought ahead large supplies of the key components for our products, and massively increased our stock holdings as a result, which isn't great for cash management, but that's probably the other key learning. Although, as I say, for me, it's always been anyway, you've always got to have a really good buffer in cash. And leaving yourself too close to the money on that front doesn't leave you the ability to flex and adapt when you do get shocks like COVID coming along. Whereas we did have good cash reserves going into it, and that enabled us to move fast and adapt and change and ultimately stay profitable throughout the period. So that was good.
Nice, like that. So what's on the 5-year plan for TSL?
So the way I've seen it is, so without going to the whole history of the group, so although the TSL brand and the group has been around for nearly 40 years, this company was actually spun out of another company in the group only in 2011-12, and I think it was on a really good growth path going into the pandemic, and the pandemic sort of upset that. And although, as I said, we stayed profitable, I think what it's meant is I've taken over a company which has been really quite a successful startup, but was just beginning its scale-up journey when the pandemic hit. That's got interrupted, and that's what we've really got to reboot. So for me, it's very much about turning TSL into a true scale-up opportunity now. And I think, without doubt, bringing in external investment as a part of that will be a key part of our story going forward, to take advantage quicker of the opportunities that are there, rather than perhaps having to pick and choose from existing internal resources, but actually being able to go and grasp more of those opportunities concurrently and speed up that growth, is where we are. So that won't necessarily be offering more products. It's possible that will come with some acquisition. I could definitely see some more acquisitions. We've had some very successful acquisitions as part of the growth story so far, but it could include acquisitions which increase the product line. But predominantly, it's going to be about, there is organic growth available to us within broadcast, but then there's also great opportunity for our control and product solutions outside of broadcast, which opens up much larger markets for those products. And I think that's where a lot of the focus will be, a lot of the growth can come from. The power management side in particular has a really big sustainability story around it as well.
Right.
So, you know, pitching a lot to that and being able to help people with a sustainability management solution that is also a solution that enables them to report against the growing number of regulations and requirements that there are around power usages and carbon emissions will, you know, that we can sell into any industry. So
what kind of challenges what kind of hurdles are you expecting in the next couple of years?
Well, inflation isn't going to go away anytime soon, and the reality is that a lot of it I don't think we've seen fully feed through. And yeah, I mean that's going to be a challenge, both in terms of obviously how we manage our gross margins on our products, but also how we reward our staff appropriately, because particularly in the UK, you know, the reality is that I think one of the things driving the ongoing inflation problem is that actually, while wages are not keeping pace with inflation, people are still doing big wage rises to try and retain staff because of the scarcity of that resource. But the challenge with that is there's an end point where that just becomes unaffordable anymore. So I think, I'm not sure it will change much from those existing challenges that we spoke about earlier. I think it's going to be resources, both in terms of components and supply chain and people. And I think it's going to be, you know, that inflation challenge is definitely still there. But we live in a globalized world, so there are opportunities to address that by looking at how we're structured across other markets. So
what still keeps you awake at night?
I'm very lucky.
You sleep like a log.
from a health issue I won't go into, but I learned some very good techniques for how to get myself to switch off at the end of the day and get into a good sleep. So actually, literally nothing. But my biggest.
I admire people like you.
My biggest, I mean, my biggest concerns are about the ability to get the right resources to bring new products in particular, to market in the speed that we need to take advantage of the opportunity. That is the single most difficult thing. We're generally dealing with the supply chain problems, but you know, the more we have to narrow down the R&D effort that we have, not because we can't afford it, but because we just can't get the right resources quick enough to take advantage of the market opportunity, then obviously that will be the biggest limiter to our growth potential.
Okay, interesting. Talk me through, because you equally have an extensive career prior to doing what you do now. Who have you looked up to? Who have you ever had a coach or a mentor, someone that's really inspired you?
I mean, definitely some, a couple of my early bosses in some of my first jobs were very much, took me under their wing and really taught me some very valuable lessons, and also were prepared to kind of let me sink or swim on occasions and give me a lot of responsibility very early and let me learn that way, which is definitely something, you know, I try to do myself now. So I would say it's mostly come from that. I think then when I then first went out and set up my own business with two partners, you know, the three of us were very much each other's mentors as well. So we actually worked in quite different fields, but they were collaborative and complementary. So we offered different things to clients, but quite often actually could all offer something to a single client. But we were very different people, very different personalities. And I think that really worked because we'd all look at a problem or a potential opportunity in a very different way. And we kind of, you know, we really sort of mentored each other through that. And then, I think as well so I spent quite a lot of my career doing transformation and turnaround work as well.
Okay.
And one or two of the kind of industry doyens, I guess, of, in that world, again, really encouraged me when I was quite young to develop my skills in that area and to learn. and gave me a lot of advice. And I actually ended up, working with one of them in my last role as well, and going into partnership with them. So I think it's always been, it's been people I've worked with that have provided that for me, rather than that I've looked externally. But certainly, a lot of people I've worked with, executives I've worked with in other roles, have had a lot of success using, obviously, external coaches and things. And in fact, my predecessor at TSL used to work with one of the big networks as well, in terms of getting that kind of mentoring and coaching support. So it's a question I'm kind of battling with at the moment, because actually, having now taken this, it can be obviously lonely as a CEO in certain situations. We have a really nice, strong leadership team. And I think it's a question I weigh up at the moment. I mean, I have a couple of people from my previous careers who I absolutely talk to on a regular basis, and discuss the problems I've got. And you definitely need those external eyes and ears if you get too insular in the way you look at things, either as a business or an individual, then it becomes a problem. So
it's a little bit like business therapy, isn't it, sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of the time it's also realizing you're not alone. And I encourage other people, someone like my operations director, I've encouraged him to go to, procurement seminars with other businesses and things, to realize that the challenges he's facing aren't individual to us or our industry. And again, but also hearing about the other ways that other people deal with them is key. There's always learning from other people's experiences. So
I love that. I call it cross-pollination across my clients. It's the same thing, different industries, different ages, different stages in business, and yet the learnings across the board are very similar.
And as I said earlier, I think with broadcast in particular, it can open its eyes and ears out to other industries a lot more than it has done in the past. So
if you had the opportunity to go back to 18-year-old Matthew, what would you tell him?
Be more patient. I think is probably the main one. I think I was always, and you could go back to a much younger Matthew, actually, and I was always ready and wanting to move to the next step before it was that time.
Yes.
And I think the first 10 years of my career, that was definitely still true. And as I mentioned earlier, I had a couple of bosses who were very good at kind of recognizing that and then finding a way of using that. But I think that's probably the main message I give. I was always quite clear about wanting to progress, and not necessarily exact career path and the job that I wanted to have, but always wanting to learn and progress, but always wanting to be at that next step or two next steps beyond, when maybe I wasn't quite ready. So just be more patient, soak up the learning and keep the effort up, and it will come.
Would you say that continued learning is one of the key skill sets that you feel leaders, business owners should have? Or what would you say makes a great either leader or business owner?
Well, I mean, answering the first question, I think yes. I mean, and the reality is I've worked with a lot of businesses, and sometimes in quite distressed turnaround situations where, unfortunately, particularly if they were founder businesses, sometimes the lack of other experience from other businesses or other industries would be one of the reasons why some of the mistakes that led to the problems that I was then going in to try and help solve arose in the first place. So I think it's very valuable to have a broad experience of different positions and different industries. I always think the most, what I always try and achieve as a CEO is I think the most important thing in the role is to be a facilitator. So I see my main job not to tell people what to do, but to enable them to do their job the best way they can. So they need to know what they're aiming for. They need to know what their goal is. And that's mine and the rest of the board's responsibility. But then it's facilitating them to achieve that rather than telling them how they should achieve that, unless they come and ask. If they come and ask and say, I'm a bit stuck here, then great. but I think it's really important to be able to, not see it as I'm the boss and I need to tell everybody exactly what they should be doing.
Okay. Last question. For anybody watching this who's either thinking about starting a business or just started a business, and you as haven't had a business and now in the position that you are in, what will your top 2 tips be?
I think the first thing I would just say, go for it. Okay. I mean, I think it's, I have obviously done that in the past and started my own business, and it's daunting, and you and ah over it for quite some time. But I think if you've got a strong enough belief about what you want to do and how you're going to go about it, I mean, you do have to have that plan and strategy. But then you should just go for it. But then the next most important thing is to know when it's not working. I think, accept that you'll make mistakes and that it might not work. Identify that early and either find some support for what the solution is, or if there doesn't appear to be one, go, okay, that one didn't work, let's move on. And I will always default to cash is king for anybody who asks me the number one thing. I think one of the challenges, particularly with a lot of the technology startups that you see, is they get given a lot of money very early for an idea, and they don't actually ever learn how to manage a business, how to implement a structure of a business and manage a business. And people keep throwing money at that idea, and they never actually really build a business organization capable of implementing that idea profitably. Interesting. So I think really understanding cash and how it operates through a business and through a working capital cycle, and how you build a business organization around that is really important.
I love that. What a wonderful note to end on. Very much sits, I guess, across the ethos I have, but equally across what we see and do with the clients that I work with. So yeah, great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew, for your insights and your wisdom there. There's a couple of really nice pearls in that's for sure. So thank you very much for that.
No problem.
The link to connect it with Matthew and the business will be is in the comment section below. So please go and do that. Reach out and say hello, or how much you've loved this interview and what you've taken away from it. Thank you for watching the Business Spotlight. Until next time.